Well, essentially we're just a coffee roastery, but I suppose we're unique in the way that we approach our relationship with our cafes. The kind of driving force behind it is to kind of generate insight for the industry by constantly asking ourselves better questions, I think. When it comes to coffee, it's more about ensuring that everything we do fulfills on a promise, which is kind of throwing, equity back down the supply chain towards the farmers. It's a pretty common tale, but we're in a position where we can realistically achieve a lot of goals that we've been wanting to achieve. I suppose I'm less focused on finding a particular coffee and more figuring out ways in which the trade of coffee can work for everybody. And that's quite a challenge, so that kind of quest for this optimal relationship kind of model is probably the main driver behind what I do, at least. Well, the coffee, it's a very famous cooperative in Ethiopia, and a lot of roasters buy it, but year on year it kind of improves and improves to a point where we can start knuckling down on specific regions of the co-op that we want to buy from. The co-op itself was the first of its kind in its region that's backed by a company called TechnoServe, which again is funded by the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. Now these two entities are doing really good work in the agricultural sector. So the way Ethiopia has traditionally worked since 2008 is traceability to coffee is very hard to achieve because it's all privatised through the Ethiopian commodity exchange. Now whether that's good or bad is kind of up for debate, but what it does do is hinder small producers from being represented on their own, so they're forced to do it as a group really. But now the commodity exchanges are like investing a lot into traceability programs, and co-ops like Nano Chala are going to play a big part of being able to find buyers for small producers like me. Drinking coffee should kind of stimulate your interest into figuring out where it comes from, and there's no better place to start than looking at Ethiopia. I mean, it is where coffee came from.
So the Nano Chala is our Ethiopian for the second year now. Personally, my favorite as a roaster. It's easy to roast, it has no defects, which is amazing. Just tastes typical like a pre-sweet Ethiopian, very syrupy, delicious, quite floral as well. So I find probably the most difficult part of my job is knowing how a coffee is going to behave as it ages as well. So from the moment that we receive a sample, we'll be roasting it and we'll cupping it, and we will write down certain tasting notes. And as the time moves on and we're actually setting a profile for it, it tends to change a lot. So you can do something really amazing with it. But as it gets older, it loses a little bit its character. And this coffee hasn't really, it just stayed the same all the way through. If not the tasting, it's even better now. For the worker assembly, probably the people. I think it's a great team, and we work really, really well together. It's like a close-knit family, and of course we work with amazing cafes as well. So we're quite proud to offer a great product.
So I brew with a V60, so I tend to conical brewing. I'm a better fan of. You get like more even distribution, I find, and the more consistency as well from brew to brew to brew. I generally use 17 grams as just a static reference point. Brew times between 3 and 4 minutes, depending on how kind of pungent you want the brew to be. And I tend to use 280 mils of brew water, which will give you a rough extraction, or if you want a TDS, talk numbers like 1.4. Depends on the grind size though. I also tend to grind a lot finer than most people using V60s. But I find it kind of just props up the sweetness and all the V60 brews. I'm not really that interested in tasting something really watery. And that's the brew, yeah. When you're brewing any kind of filter brew, turbulence is key. Well, you kind of want to just make sure that everything's evenly saturated, so you just get like a spoon or whatever and kind of sweep through the brew when you've done your second pour or whatever, when you've got enough water in there essentially. And that'll give you even extractions a lot easier. Cut profile on the Ethiopians, well on this particular one is, like famously aromatic, really floral. Expect a lot of lavender on the nose. like hints of cinnamon, but like lower on the spice end, more on the floral end, white blossom, stuff like that. Also a lot of kind of sweet demerara sugar type notes. Tasting it like really fruit forward peaches, as you can kind of see in the illustration, like cranberry tartness, and a lot of like green apple, almost white grape acidity, depending on how you roast it. And then the finish is like classically kind of toffee caramelized stuff. Yeah.